Welcome back to another episode of That's Mental TV with me, Christine Charles.
And me, Jessica Sandberg.
Welcome back. We are talking today about children and young people's mental health. And we've got the perfect panel guests to help in that area. If you're a teacher, a parent, a young person or a child, this is the perfect episode for you. Now, the government have recently acknowledged there is an issue with in mental health, young people and children, and so have set aside £79 million to help aid schools in becoming better, efficient and aided in mental health. In fact, I'm going to share some numbers and I'm going to read this out so I don't get the detail wrong. They have put aside £79 million to help schools and colleges as mental health support teams. Now, the aim is that schools and colleges will grow from 59 to 400 by April 2023, supporting nearly 3 million children. However, because of the current pandemic and the situation that we're in, this is on pause and hold. We have the perfect panel guests today who are boots on the ground and doing some amazing work in this area of mental health already. Allow me to introduce to you Andy Gibson, founder of Mindapples, and Jo Morton-Brown, founder of Flourish TV and emotional health practitioner. Welcome to the show, guys. Thank you for agreeing to be on this episode. How are you both?
Good, thank you. Yep, very, very well. Feeling at home in my head.
Fantastic.
Good, thank you. And just taking each day at a time. That's what I've realised is the best thing to do sometimes, just each week and each day at a time.
Yes. And, you know, this is why I'm so grateful that you both agreed to be on this episode on the show, because you both live and preach what you do in your work and in your lives. And Jo, we've met recently through LinkedIn, which was amazing. And it was very quick, wasn't it, the connection? Andy, you and I have known each other for about a decade on and off. I was trying to work it out. And we met through my sister many years ago when you were just starting Mindapples. And I knew back then there's something really unique and special about Mindapples. And it was almost like you were ahead of the game back then. Mental health wasn't really talked about in the way that it is now. We knew it existed, but it wasn't getting the exposure that it desperately needed. So Jo, we will come on to you, but Andy, I want to start with you. Tell us, what is Mindapples all about? What's the purpose and how did it start?
So yeah, it was 2008 we started the campaign. And it began as a side project for me. I was interested in trying to use technology to tackle social problems, improve the world. I was running an education startup. And it just struck me that all the conversations around trying to tackle social problems, improve people's quality of life, seemed to be dancing around this idea of how we felt, our emotional health, the understanding we needed to have about our minds. And there wasn't really anything around that back then. So this is before the 5 Ways to Wellbeing, Foresight Report, before Time to Change. So we were part of that first wave of getting people thinking about their minds in a different way. And the goal with Mindapples has always been to make looking after our minds as natural as brushing our teeth. So we're not doctors, we're not clinical practitioners, we're not coming in trying to say, we're going to help you with a particular diagnosis. What we want is to help people understand their minds and manage themselves and make sense of what's happening to them. So if you, for example, get diagnosed with a mood disorder, that may be the first time anyone's ever talked to you about what a mood is. And so we want to try and backfill a lot of the things that we've done in public health generally. We're taught in school about plaque on our teeth, cholesterol in our diet, germs on our hands, remember those? And yet we're not taught about stress, about mood management, about decision making, creativity, the building blocks that make us think and feel the way that we do. So that's the campaign Mindapples has been trying to raise public health literacy and get us all thinking and talking more about our minds.
And I know, Jess, you're absolutely biting, no pun intended, to ask the next question, but I want to just really hone in about your purpose, Andy. What do you get out of the work that you do? Because I mean, Mindapples is amazing, you know, the raft of work that you do. What's your personal purpose for Mindapples?
It's interesting. Some of it, I think, is stubbornness. I mean, you have an idea and you just don't want to let it go. And in the early days, it was quite tough because, as you say, we were quite early into this. There wasn't really much infrastructure and certainly no funding around for it. I think part of it is just that it feels like a truth that is obvious and that needs to be brought up, and I enjoy trying to make the case for that, explaining things. I like that moment of realization when people go, oh yes, of course, obviously I realized that I've always known that, and now that you pointed out, we can talk about it. But my personal connection to it, I suppose, is that I try to say that my goal is to enjoy my life and help others to do the same, and it starts with enjoying our minds. If the world around us is problematic, then, as it has been last year, feeling safe in our heads is very valuable. But actually, if the world around us is wonderful and we're not comfortable inside our minds, we can't enjoy it. So it seems to me that it's a good place to start to feel at home in our heads.
Thank you.
What are some of the challenges that you've had with Mindapples?
So it's a funny thing trying to start something that's we're quite early into it, because there is a need, there is a desire, but there isn't necessarily the language for it or the market for it. And so a lot of what we've been doing for a decade really is building a market for this. We started before Headspace, for example. Andy from Headspace came to our launch event in 2010 and ran a meditation workshop. And then since then, meditation has really taken off. People weren't talking about it back then. And so it's that process. So we've got an app that we've launched recently, just the Mindapples app, if you search on Android and iOS, but it's not a meditation app. So all people searching for meditation apps might not necessarily find it, but we don't want to describe it as a meditation app, because what it's doing is giving people a more educational approach, knowledge about the mind. So it's always that balance of trying to meet people where they are, but also saying we could be doing things differently or better. And that's the juggling act of, I think, a lot of social enterprise.
Andy, you've talked a bit about your app just now, and my next question really was about the tools that Mindapples have. So talk to us a little bit about how Mindapples can help. If anyone's watching right now and thinking, wow, that's easily accessible for me. Describe what the app does and the range of tools that you have that could help people.
Yeah, I should say as well, we work with all kinds of different age ranges and audiences. So most of what we're doing is working with adult populations. So the app is kind of 13 and above, really. So target audience is 16 and above, probably. But what it's doing is insights from psychology and cognitive science, helping people to make sense of what's going on in their minds, and also asking questions, asking about what you do to manage stress. How do you manage your moods? What raises your energy? And then you can browse what other people have said around that. So if you're struggling to sleep, you can reflect on what helps you to sleep and make a note of that, but also see what other people are saying helps them to sleep, and kind of crowdsource some of this knowledge. And so in terms of the tools that we provide, a lot of it is that kind of education content. We've got e-learning, we do a lot of workplace programs, so we support big companies like Tesco and Morgan Stanley with trying to manage their minds. But we've then tried to take those tools and turn them into toolkits for campaigners, for champions. And so in the context of the work we've done with young people, a lot of it has been equipping teachers and youth workers, school staff, parents, even kind of older children wanting to help their peers, trying to give them tools and materials. So we have things like, well, the thing that you can see behind me is the Mindapples cards. So that's something that we did as part of our campaign for many years, which we used to go to festivals with big trees asking young people what they do that's good for their mind. And so it gets people to share a 5 a day for their mind. And then we've been putting together guides like this is a list of different principles to use when you are promoting mental health. So principles like knowledge is power, choice is not chores. Don't tell people what they should do, just give them information and help them decide what they want. The idea that we all have mental health, that this isn't something just for a small number of people who've got problems, this is for everyone, and it should be as inclusive as possible. So that's been the focus, particularly on our charitable side, is giving people the tools and knowledge to be able to improve their lives and support people around them.
Wow. Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing that, because I think there is a whole kind of area around education that's needed. And Jo, we are moving on to you because you're actually in the education sector, which is why this is a perfect marriage today of guests that we've got. So Jo, tell us a little bit about what you do.
So I work as an emotional health practitioner, which is just different roles blended into one. I work as a school-based counsellor at a secondary school and a sixth form. So they're the ages of 11 to 18. I work as a family support worker with primary school children, so 4 to 11. And that's offering kind time. So just that ability to offer somebody, those little ones, the opportunity to have somebody to listen to their worries. And then I deliver clinical supervision, also delivering training to adults about mental health in children and young people. And I can't do it quite so much now, but albeit it's virtual now, but travelling to schools to deliver assemblies or PSHE workshops about mental health for children and young people.
Wow, wow. And why do you do what you do? I'm going to ask you the same question I asked to Andy.
So it's a tough one. My why is that I always wanted, I suppose I want to be that person that I wish I had when I was younger. So when I was a teen. So it's just becoming that person that I wish I could have had in my life when I was younger.
Wow, brilliant answer. Thank you. Now, what's different about children's mental health now compared with pre-pandemic?
That's a really tricky question because it's affected so many different age groups in so many different ways. I think the most important thing when it comes to COVID and the pandemic is we instantly think about, the hardship and how tough it's been for our children and young people. But I do think we've always got to remember actually what strength it's brought them. It's, tapped into their resilience and actually what they've gained from the experience of COVID. However, what I have noticed is during the pandemic, certainly the last lockdown, so winter 2021, is that the younger ones were almost struggling to process their emotions. Therefore, the little bodies with these big emotions were just almost exploding out. So anger outbursts, emotional meltdowns, bedwetting, like bumpy words, night terrors. And then I noticed that with the older ones, secondary school and upwards, that actually what was happening is and what has happened is they've almost kind of closed down. So it was almost, some of them were refusing to leave their home during that lockdown. Some of them were just refusing to make contact with other people. So there was this real big change throughout the pandemic, that third lockdown. So I feel that the difference now is just working on that ability to provide stability, to provide as much as we can of certainty, which during a pandemic is near on impossible. But it's just, for the older ones, it's just the communication. I've really noticed that there's a real difference, bums on seats, and just trying to stay engaged sometimes. So those social skills is different now compared to what it was.
And we're going to be talking about engagement in a short while. But yeah, I think just listening to you now, I'm thinking of my 6-year-old niece and the outbursts that she was having last summer. It really did impact her mental health. And at one point we were really worried about her. Even when she went back to school, there was an adjustment period. And that's just one child out of how many millions? So thank you for sharing that. Jess, I know you've got a question, haven't you?
What are some of the trends that you've noticed from when you first started to now?
So with regards to when I first started, my job was over 10 years ago. So back when I started 10 years ago compared to now is I actually was brought into one particular school because there was such an increase in self-harm. So it's kind of just changed over the years, but self-harm is still present. You still have those young people that are kind of have suicide ideation or kind of wanting to take their own lives. And then you also have, which I've kind of just seen more of an increase, is that low self-esteem, that low self-worth, and how young people nowadays seem to compare themselves to other, what's known as compare and despair. So it's just a variety of things really. But yeah, self-esteem and self-worth is something that's really, really affects young people and the way that they aren't necessarily kind to their mind.
And your TV channel Flourish is doing a lot in that area in terms of helping people with young people and children with their confidence. It's a brilliant channel. Do check it out when you can, because that was something that I came across your channel on LinkedIn, on social media, and thought, wow, this is amazing. So, well done you for doing that. I have a question for you both, and it's around the engagement aspect. How do we engage our teachers, our school staff, and our parents? I know that's a big question, but in both of your experiences, Andy, you work with schools and universities, and Jo, you're working with teachers and parents and school staff. So how do we engage them this season, as we start to slowly lift out of lockdown and get to some sort of rhythm and routine?
I'll start, and then it's over to Andy. I think that it's all about partnership. For me personally, parenting, and I'm a mum myself, parenting has changed. Like, I never imagined parenting where you'd be a teacher at the same time, and your home, you're safe, you're calm, your nice home would become a school. So I feel that parenting has changed. I feel that teachers, no matter how long they have been doing their job, no matter how experienced they are in being a teacher, this particular year, they have all, joined the same level playing field of becoming a brand spanking new online teacher, which they didn't train for. And I've got certain friends with, regards to those that are teachers, who never even knew how to work Teams or Zoom. So it's just changed things. But I do think that it's that partnership about actually what's best for the student, what's best for the child.
Yeah, and I think the partnership word is a really helpful one, and it's interesting watching the homeschooling thing has brought education into the home and made parents have to engage, have to understand more about how education works, learn more about what teachers do. Both my parents were teachers, so I grew up understanding what that involves. But of course, for a lot of people, you don't really know what the work is. How do teachers prepare? What does it involve? So being told you've got to teach your kid maths, you suddenly go, oh, right, yeah, there's a lot of skill here. We need to learn how to do it. Our experience with it has been that one of the best things for getting kids engaged in this is to engage the parents and helping them to understand it and make sense of it. And it goes back to, when I was starting out Mindapples, I met a guy called Jerry Stein over in Minneapolis who ran a project called Learning Dreams. And his project was to go around asking adults in the community what they wanted to learn, what was their learning dream, and then make it happen for them. And what they found is that the results for their children went up in school. They did better in school because they were in a learning environment at home. And I think the same applies to mental health and well-being. If we can, equip teachers, for example, to do check-ins with their pupils, see how they're feeling, get them sharing what they find is helpful for them, but then also take those home to their parents, get their parents to share what they think is good for their mind, get the whole family talking about it. It's that the bridges across from our different experiences that I think really help. And the story that I keep often coming back to is we did a tree at the Thames Festival many years ago. We were asking people to fill in little Mindapples cards, and one woman came up and she tried to take one of our pens, and she said, "Can I have a pen?" I was like, "Well, you can have a pen, but it would be nice if you wrote a Mindapple card. That is what we're here to do." And I tried to give one to her son, who had, I think, a learning disability, and she said, "Oh no, he can't do it. He's special." But he seemed interested, so I gave him the card anyway. And he proceeded to write out 5 things that he thought were good for his mind. And his mum, was still struggling, and he had to help her figure out what she did for herself, because she spent so much time thinking about how to care for other people. She just hadn't thought about it for herself. And that is the conversation I think we want to promote more.
Wow. What a unique angle, because actually we don't, do we, as adults, if we're caring for another. So yeah, wow, incredible answer. And that's quite thought-provoking for me as well, going forward. Jess, you have a question, don't you?
Yeah, is the government doing enough, and are we doing enough as adults as well to help children?
I can certainly give you a brief answer to that, which is I'm seeing very good positive signs that the government wants to fund this and invest in it. The thing to bear in mind, though, is that resilience is not just about promoting the coping skills and the tools for dealing with things. It's also about removing risks. And so I think what we often need to look at in a policy context for adults as well is what can we do to consider mental health and well-being as a part of how we do all of our policy making, not just we'll do whatever policies we want over here and then we'll spend a bit of money on kind of, you know, also trying to mitigate the damage of it. So I think this has got to be mainstreamed into our whole thinking about how we support young people.
And you know, we've come a long way just in the past 2 years, and we keep evolving. So it's really positive what's happening, actually, I think, you know, in the United Kingdom especially. So it's we're looking forward, aren't we? What can a teacher do and use to support their school children? Both of you, I mean, you've got a wealth of experience here.
I think that when it comes to those teachers that are parents, I think that it's really hard about the multitasking. And I feel that that's not just teachers, that's parents, that's everybody's, that's aunties and uncles, that's nannies and granddads. And I feel that what is so easy to do nowadays is, you know, just put other people first. And when we do that, I feel that we forget about the importance of being kind to our mind. Like Andy was saying about I just think that 5 a day and about that, you know, just looking after yourself. It's like the oxygen mask, which I'm sure you've heard of that metaphor, which is if you're on an aeroplane and, you know, you need to put on your oxygen mask before you're able to assist other people. And I just feel that sometimes we are so busy in life, and for some people I feel it's important that they almost reflect upon, what does busyness mean to them? Because for me, there are children that are going to school, they're coming, and give it a few more months, I know, because you've literally got the ability where there's not so many after school clubs, if any, at the moment, but we're moving forward. But normally, you know, Monday it's brownies, Tuesdays it's swimming, Thursdays it's football, you know. And it's actually, I feel that the children and the families need that time to be united, need that time to be together, need that time where there's no expectations. And I feel that sometimes people wear busyness and stress as a badge of honor, when actually sometimes it's just about being in the moment and being present that can be the most important and most useful thing for our children and for the young people out there.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that's happened a lot over the decade or so I've been doing this, I've been seeing the kind of progression in schools of things like the kind of learned optimism training, and Martin Seligman's done a lot of pilots around emotional literacy. And I think schools have got much better at doing the kind of counselling side of things, getting kids talking about their emotional health. But one thing that I think we could do more of is more of the education side. And so for me, there are a lot of building blocks of just making sense of the minds and understanding what words like stress or moods mean, you know, that actually does play into the strengths of what schools do well, what teachers are comfortable doing. And so I think for me, a lot of this is about building up that mental literacy, that we need a language to use together. And so if teachers can play a role in helping kids to, you know, make sense of it, give a word to that feeling that you've got, this is what it's called, it's normal, it's common, you know, this is the sort of way we might talk about it and deal with it. Partly it helps kids to mentalize better, to understand what's going on in their mind, in other people's minds, that progression that we get as we grow up. But also part of learning is about teaching. It's not just that children are passive recipients of knowledge, and they also teach their parents things. They explain stuff to people. They share that knowledge on. And so I think actually helping kids to explain how they're feeling to their parents often teaches the parents a lot about their own minds and gets us all talking about it. And my friend Jack Claff, I asked him many years ago what it was, what the secret was to having kids. He had a couple of kids who's a bit older than me, and he said, the thing you've got to realize is that they're right and you're wrong, and once you crack that, they'll teach you everything you need to know. So I think that for me is the power. Sending a kid home with a Mindapple card and I was saying, Mum, what do you do that's good for your mind? I think there's real life and joy in that.
Thank you. What a way to end today's episode, that you know, kids are right and adults are wrong, and it's a great way to think and have in the back of your mind. Andy, Jo, thank you so much for joining us. Any last words of tips, advice or wisdom for parents, teachers, school staff in children and young people?
I suppose my thing is the small stuff really helps. A lot of happiness, a lot of resilience comes from the way we live, not big ticket items, but just the small interactions day to day. So even just checking in with each other, asking how we're feeling, taking a moment together as a family to do something that you all enjoy together. That's the small stuff that keeps us going, as Jo said at the start, taking every day at a time, but take each moment for what it is and enjoy it.
I think that's a perfect thing, because I feel that it's about the importance of building on that positive mental health, and it's about children and young people realizing that they have a responsibility to help themselves, but for them to do that they need the support from teachers, from professionals, and from their parents. And that's one thing that I did the Flourish YouTube channel is to kind of go there with how to support themselves, because it is this sense of responsibility that they need to learn at a very young age about mental health, but also what they can do to help themselves as well.
Fantastic. Andy, Jo, thank you so much for joining us on That's Mental TV. And if you want to learn more, simply go into your search engine, type in Flourish TV, Jo Morton-Brown will come up, or Mindapples, and or both. We are going to post the links as we post this episode. Thank you for joining us. We hope this episode has helped you and supported you in where you are with your journey with mental health. See you next time.